Failure feels like an ending, like a final judgment. Our culture treats it that way, something purely negative to avoid. But that feeling of an ending might be the start of a different conversation. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, saw it differently. He said difficulties reveal our character. He said we should be grateful for teachers that come as obstacles. That's the radical idea. Failure isn't your enemy, it's your instructor, your most demanding one, and your most valuable. We're going to look at 25 Stoic reflections. A toolkit to turn a setback into an advantage for growth, moving past abstract philosophy into daily mental exercises. How loving what happens to you becomes a source of strength. Seeing a closed door not as a blockade, but as the path forward, reframing your entire relationship. So, what's one challenge you're trying to make sense of right now? That instructor starts with one question. The first step in dealing with failure is figuring out what was actually yours to manage. You put everything into a project and it falls apart. You try to fix a relationship with a conversation and it just makes things worse. The first instinct is to take all the blame, to feel like the whole outcome is just a personal flaw. But Epictetus, the Stoic, had this tool. It seems almost too simple. He called it the Dichotomy of Control. Some things are up to us, he said, and some things are not. What's up to us are our opinions, our impulses, what we want, what we avoid. Basically, whatever is our own doing. Everything else isn't up to us. Our body, our property, our reputation, any position we hold. Things that are not our own doing, the power isn't really in the list, it's in the sorting. When something goes wrong, your first task isn't to judge it. It's to categorize it. Think about a professional setback. You work for weeks on a proposal. You do the research, you polish the presentation, you get ready for every question. You deliver it confidently and you get a no. That outcome, the rejection, that goes in the column of things not up to you. It's an external event, it happened. But your preparation, your effort, how clearly you thought, how you acted in the meeting, those were completely within your control. The suffering starts when we link the two columns together. We take that external no and we use it to attack our internal effort. We decide the rejection means our work was bad or that we aren't good enough. That's a judgment we're choosing to add on. Epictetus would say, it's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. Your reaction is where your power is. So take a recent disappointment, something that felt like a failure. In your mind, draw two columns. In one, put everything that was truly yours, your intention, your focus, the energy you brought. In the other, put the results you couldn't command. Other people's decisions, the timing of events. Just seeing them separated starts to loosen things. It turns one big disaster into a mix of what you own and what you don't. And in that space, a new kind of freedom can start to breathe. You could go beyond just accepting what you can't control. You could learn to love it. That's the second reflection. Amor Fati, a love of fate. It's not pretending something bad is good. It's not a hollow positive statement. It's a deep, strategic choice to embrace everything that happens, especially the difficult things, as necessary material for your own growth. The philosopher Nietzsche gave it that name. He was influenced by Stoic thought. He said, "My formula for greatness in a human being is amor fati. That one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. Not merely bear what is necessary, but love it." The Stoic emperor Marcus Aurelius was practicing this centuries earlier. He wrote in his private journal, a reminder to himself, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. And elsewhere he said, accept the things to which fate binds you. And love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart. It's the ultimate cognitive reframing tool. It takes the raw material of a setback, a rejection, a loss, and it forges that into fuel. It asks you to see the event not as an interruption to your story, but as an essential chapter of it. Think of Thomas Edison, his quest to create a practical light bulb. The common story is he failed thousands of times. A reporter asked him, "How does it feel to have failed so many times?" Edison's reply reframed the entire endeavor. He said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That is Amor Fati in action. He didn't just tolerate those experiments. He loved the data each one provided. He embraced every dead end as a necessary step, a step that narrowed the path forward. Each failure was loved, not for the disappointment, but for the lesson it carried. It was fuel. So here is a challenge. Look at one aspect of a current difficulty you're facing. Maybe it's a project that stalled, a plan that fell through, a difficult conversation you need to have. Instead of resisting that piece of it, practice loving it. Not the pain, but the purpose it might serve. What hidden strength is it asking you to develop? What patience, what creativity, what clearer vision? Amor Fati turns the obstacle into the path itself. And that changes everything. Loving your fate creates a new space around a problem. It lets you step back, see it from a different angle. That's the third reflection. The view from above. It's a mental exercise, a deliberate shift. You zoom out from the immediate sting. You rise above the moment to see the larger tapestry of your life. And then to see your life within everything else. The Stoics practiced this to reduce the emotional weight of a single event, to gain clarity. In a crisis, it feels like the whole world. Your heart races, your mind fixates. Everything narrows to that one point of pressure. The view from above widens the lens. It asks you to see your struggle as one scene in a much longer story. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire, he constantly returned to this. He wrote reminders to himself. He said, "Think of the universal substance, of which you have a very small portion, and of universal time, of which a short interval is assigned to you, and of destiny, and what part of it you are." He was contemplating the smallness of human affairs in the grand scheme. Not to make them meaningless, but to put them in their proper proportion. A failed project feels catastrophic today, but imagine viewing it from 5 years out. From that future point, looking back, what do you see? You'd likely see a turning point, a lesson learned, a skill you developed because of that struggle. You might see how it led to a different opportunity, one you couldn't have seen from the ground. The emotion of the moment fades. What remains is the shape of the experience. Its contour in your growth. Here's a simple way to practice. Think of one current worry, one thing that feels like a heavy weight. Now, physically step back. If you can, look out a window, see the sky, see the trees or the buildings, see the world moving, and ask one question. Will this matter in a year? Often, the honest answer is no. Or it will matter, but not in the way it feels now. It will matter as a chapter, not the entire book. This practice drains the panic. It returns agency to you. Because when you see the larger landscape, you can start to navigate it. You're no longer just reacting to a single rock in the path. You're seeing the whole path. And that changes where you decide to go. The Stoics had this practice. They didn't wait for things to go wrong. They'd rehearse it in their minds first. To take away its power, that's the fourth reflection, Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils, and on the surface, it sounds like pessimism. Why imagine things failing? But it wasn't about expecting the worst. It was a kind of emotional inoculation, a strategic exercise. If you visualize a setback ahead of time, you drain it. The surprise is gone, the terror is gone. You prepare your mind to respond, not just to react. Seneca was a master of this. He wrote about it to his friend Lucilius. He said we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and to counter that, he'd advise regularly thinking about losing what you value, not to become morbid, but to become free. He wrote that if you anticipate trouble, you take away its power when it arrives. The goal is two things. First, it reduces the fear of failure. If you've already walked through the scenario mentally, the actual event loses its sharp edge. And second, maybe more profound, it builds a deep gratitude for what you have now. By mentally removing the comforts you take for granted, you see them fresh when you return. Take a common fear, giving a big presentation. The anxiety can be paralyzing. What if I forget my lines? What if the tech fails? What if they ask a question I can't answer? Premeditatio Malorum asks you to lean into those questions. Spend 2 minutes, deliberately, calmly walk through that feared outcome. Imagine your laptop freezing right as you begin. See it happening. Then, in your mind, craft your response. You take a breath. You acknowledge the issue with a calm smile. You have a printed copy as a backup, or you proceed from memory. The audience sees a composed professional adapting, not a flustered presenter. You've just rehearsed resilience. By facing the possibility, you've prepared a pathway through it. The anxiety transforms from a vague cloud of dread into a set of manageable contingencies. So here's a prompt. Think of an upcoming challenge you're nervous about, a difficult conversation, a financial decision, a creative risk. For just 2 minutes, mentally walk through the version where it doesn't go as you hope. But don't stop at the failure. Focus on the next part. How would you respond with patience, with courage, with resourcefulness? This practice doesn't attract misfortune. It builds an inner fortress, so no matter what the world brings, you've already charted a course through it from a place of calm. A journal is a kind of laboratory. You can take a failure there and dissect it. No judgment, it's private. You take the event apart piece by piece to see what it's really made of. This isn't venting. It's not self-pity. It's the fifth reflection, a strategic post-mortem. The Stoics had a nightly ritual for this. Seneca called it an examination of conscience. He said to review your entire day, question your actions. He would ask himself, what bad habit did you cure today? What fault did you resist? In what way are you better? That was his method to turn every day, success or setback, into a lesson. Marcus Aurelius kept a journal. We call it Meditations. It was never for publication. It was his personal training ground. He modeled that honest self-assessment. He wrote lines to himself. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize that, and you find strength, or another one. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. His journal was a conversation with his highest self. A constant course correction. He used it to strip away the story, to see the facts of his own judgments. Here's how you can adopt it. After a day where something felt like a failure, take 10 minutes. Open a notebook, a digital document, anything. Use a simple prompt. First, state the event plainly. No drama, just the facts. Second, ask, what was within my control in that situation? List only those things, your preparation, your attitude, your effort. Third, ask, what judgment did I add to the outcome? Did I tell myself a story about what it means? Fourth, and this is the most important, what is one lesson here I can carry forward? That shifts the focus from blame, which is a dead end, to learning, which is a path. The goal is to transform the emotional residue of the day into clear, actionable insight. It turns a confusing disappointment into a set of data points. Discrete data points you can work with. So tonight, before you finish, write down one key question, not a harsh accusation, a curious inquiry. You might ask, what did I assume would happen that didn't? Or where did I have more influence than I first thought? That single question becomes a flashlight. It illuminates a corner of the experience, a corner you might have missed in the shadows of the moment. That nightly journal builds a quiet confidence, a confidence in your own effort, no matter what's happening outside. It points to something deeper, a shift. What if you could detach your sense of worth from the outcome? This is the sixth reflection process over outcome. It asks you to judge your success by the quality of your effort, not the result. The result is a mix of your actions and 1,000 things you can't control. but your effort, your intention, your focus, that's your domain. The Stoics called this virtuous action. Doing the right thing for the right reason to the best of your ability, and then letting go. It's a profound liberation. You're freed to perform with excellence, with integrity, whether you get applause, a promotion, or even a simple acknowledgement. Your validation comes from inside the act itself. Epictetus taught this with clarity. He used the analogy of an archer. The archer's job, he said, is to take aim carefully and release the bowstring skillfully. That's the process, that's what's within the archer's control. But once the arrow is in flight, it's subject to the wind, a sudden movement of the target, any number of interferences. The skilled archer doesn't judge success by whether the arrow hits the bullseye. They judge it by the quality of their aim and release. To be distressed by a gust of wind deflecting the arrow is foolish. It was never theirs to command. Think of an artist who spends months on a painting. They pour their technique, their emotion, their vision into every brushstroke. That's their process, their virtuous action. The painting is exhibited. Maybe it sells for a high price to great acclaim. Maybe it sits unnoticed. If the artist's self-worth is tied to that sale or that acclaim, they're at the mercy of a fickle world. But if their satisfaction comes from the depth of their engagement with the work itself, from the integrity of their creative process, then no external outcome can take that away. They've already succeeded, so here's a practical shift. Identify one current goal you're working toward, a fitness goal, a project at work, learning a new skill. Now define for yourself what a virtuous process would look like for that goal. Not the target weight, not the finished project, not the mastered song. Define the quality of the effort. It might be showing up for your workout with full presence, even on tired days. It might be dedicating 30 minutes of focused, undistracted work on your project each morning. It might be practicing a difficult passage on your instrument with patience, without frustration. Commit to judging your days by that standard of process alone. The outcomes will come as they will, but you'll have built something unshakable, a practice of excellence no result can ever diminish. Failure isn't a tragedy. It's just data. That's the seventh reflection, a kind of reset. The Stoics said events are neutral, they're just facts, good or bad. That's something we add. And that's where the suffering starts. Marcus Aurelius wrote it plainly. You have power over your mind, not outside events. See that, and you find strength. In another passage, he gave the instruction, if you're distressed by something external, the pain isn't from the thing, it's from your judgment of it. And you can revoke that judgment any moment. The event is just the event. Our label is what gives it weight. Take a missed flight. You rush to the airport, but the gate's closed. The plane is pulling back. The immediate judgment is disaster. This is bad. I'm stranded. My plans are ruined. All that stress, that feeling of being a victim, that's the added layer. The Stoic practice is to strip that away. See the facts. The plane left. You're at the airport. You have a ticket for a later flight. Those are the conditions. From that neutral point, you can ask a different question. Given these new conditions, what's the most resourceful action, or the most patient one, maybe even creative? Now you have 3 unexpected hours. You could read that book you've been putting off, find a quiet corner and plan the next part of the trip, or just watch the world and practice being present. The missed flight didn't create a bad day. It created a different day, one you can still navigate with virtue. That reframing turns a setback from a personal indictment into just a change in the landscape. The landscape isn't good or bad, it just is. Your job is to navigate it well. A business deal falls through. The data point is the other party decided not to proceed. The judgment we add is, I'm a failure or this ruins everything. Strip the judgment. The fact is, you're now free to pursue other opportunities, and you learned more about what that client values. The raw data is invaluable. It tells you what to adjust next time. So here's a small exercise. Bring to mind one recent event you labeled as bad, a work critique that stung, a social plan that was cancelled, a goal you didn't meet. Practice seeing it as a neutral event, just the facts without the story. Then ask one question. Within this new set of facts, what are two potential opportunities, however small? Maybe the critique highlights a skill you can now improve. The cancelled plan gives you an evening of unexpected rest. The unmet goal clarifies what you actually want. This isn't fake positivity. It's reclaiming your power to define what happens next. The event is just information. Your response is the art. That neutral event is waiting, and maybe the strongest thing you can do is see the obstacle not as a blockade, but as the path. The eighth reflection, the obstacle is the way. Every barrier has the path forward inside it. It's a Stoic idea. It redefines adversity. An obstacle isn't something standing between you and the goal. It's part of achieving it. It forces a different kind of thinking. It demands innovation. It forges a strength comfort never could. Marcus Aurelius wrote this down. He wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. The impediment to action advances action. It doesn't just delay. It propels." The obstacle isn't a stop sign. It's a detour sign, pointing you to a route you wouldn't have taken. And that route often leads somewhere better. This connects to what we call a growth mindset, the belief that abilities can be developed, that challenges are opportunities to expand. The Stoics were doing this centuries ago. Every difficulty was training material for the soul. A historical example is the phoenix, the mythical bird consumed by fire and then rising from its own ashes. Renewed, more vibrant cultures have similar stories, not as literal events, as metaphors. They represent a truth that destruction can come before creation, that an ending can be the condition for a more resilient beginning. Total loss becomes the way to a stronger form. In a modern business context, think of a failed product launch. A company pours resources into a new gadget. It gets to market and it flops. The data is clear. Customers aren't buying. The immediate reaction could be to see a catastrophic waste. But a leader applying this would ask a different question. What is this failure showing us? The obstacle of rejection becomes the way. By listening to why it failed, the company might discover a hidden need. Something they overlooked. Maybe customers were using it for something it wasn't designed for. That failed launch becomes the crucial research. It points to a more successful pivot. The obstacle revealed the true path. So here's a challenge. Name one current obstacle in your life. A logistical problem, a resource shortage, a difficult person, an inner doubt. Instead of asking how to remove it, ask this: how could this very obstacle be directing me to a better solution? If your path is blocked, what new direction does it force you to consider? If a resource is missing, what creativity does it demand? That shift turns a wall into a doorway. Your self-worth shouldn't spin with every compliment or criticism. If your peace depends on outside applause, you've handed someone else the remote to your emotions. That's a fragile way to live. The ninth reflection is about building an inner fortress against that. Cultivating indifference to external praise and blame. It's not about becoming cold or arrogant. It's about finding your center of gravity within yourself. The Stoics called it the inner citadel, a place of unshakable judgment and security that you build. When that citadel is strong, the noise of the world fades to a murmur. The sting of failure, when it comes wrapped in harsh criticism, can't penetrate the walls. Epictetus put it directly. He said, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, don't make excuses about what is said. Instead answer, he was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone." It's a brilliant deflection. It acknowledges the criticism without accepting its power to define you. More importantly, he reminded his students that the opinions of others are among those things not up to us. They're external events like the weather. To let a passing opinion disturb your peace is as irrational as getting angry at a rain cloud. The key is in the sorting. You have to learn to differentiate between constructive feedback, which is useful data, and destructive criticism, which is just noise. Constructive feedback points to something within your control, a technique you can refine, a behavior you can adjust. It comes with a path forward. Destructive criticism is often about the other person's mood, their projections, their own unmet needs. It offers no actionable insight. It's just an emotional event happening near you. The Stoic practice is to receive the first with gratitude, as useful information, and to let the second pass by like a leaf on a river without grabbing onto it. Consider the story of an artist, a painter, or a musician working in a style that's ahead of its time. The initial exhibitions are met with public confusion or rejection. The critics dismiss the work. If the artist's internal citadel is weak, they might abandon their vision, trying to chase the approval they lost. But if their standard of excellence is internal, if their judgment of what constitutes good work comes from their own deep engagement with the craft, they'll continue. They'll see the rejection not as a verdict on their worth, but as a sign that the audience hasn't yet caught up. They're guided by their own metric. History is filled with such figures, from Vincent van Gogh to countless innovators whose internal compass led them through years of external indifference. Their security wasn't in today's applause, but in the integrity of their own process. So take a moment and reflect. Recall a time when criticism from a boss, a peer, or a stranger online affected you deeply. It deflated you or made you angry for days. Now, with the space of hindsight, ask yourself this clarifying question. Setting aside their words, what was my own internal metric for that effort? How would I have judged my own preparation, my intention, my execution, if no one else was watching? Your answer to that question is a brick. It's the material you use to build your inner citadel. Every time you refer to your own standard, you lay another stone, and slowly the winds of opinion lose their power to knock you over. You find a calm that no review can ever take away. Resilience comes from choosing small hardships on purpose. It sounds strange, why would you do that? But the Stoics treated it as training. You don't build resilience by avoiding difficulty. You build it by taking on manageable doses voluntarily. The aim is to reduce fear of the hardship life will inevitably bring, a financial loss, a rejection, an illness. By practicing with small, chosen challenges, you inoculate yourself against the shock of bigger ones. You learn discomfort is survivable. You can function within it. Your mind can stay calm even when your body isn't at ease. Seneca wrote about this to his friend Lucilius. He advised practicing poverty, not to become poor, but to remove its terror. Set aside days, he wrote, where you're content with the cheapest food, the roughest clothes, and ask yourself, is this what I feared? It's a direct confrontation. By entering a state you dread voluntarily, you prove you can endure it, and in that proof you find freedom. The fear loses its grip. Modern life is built for comfort. Temperature control, instant gratification, endless entertainment. It's a blessing, but it can make us fragile. A minor inconvenience feels like a crisis. A setback feels like a catastrophe. Voluntary discomfort resensitizes you to your own capacity. It's not self-punishment, it's reclamation. You reclaim the ability to say, this is unpleasant and I am okay. Simple practices work. A cold shower for the last 30 seconds, skipping a meal and noticing the sensations without panic, walking instead of driving for a short errand, or turning off the heater in your car on a cool day. It's a minor, controlled exposure to a sensation you'd normally avoid. In those few minutes, you practice observing the discomfort without reacting. You breathe through it. You realize you're separate from the feeling. It's happening, but it's not you. That mental space is the training ground. When a larger failure comes, a professional disappointment, a personal loss, you've already practiced holding discomfort without being consumed. You've strengthened the part that can say, this is difficult and I can navigate it. So for the week ahead, choose one small, voluntary discomfort. safe, manageable, brief. Leave your phone in another room for an hour. Eat a simple meal without distraction. Take that cooler shower. Do a demanding chore you've been putting off. The point isn't the act, it's the conscious choice. The moment you decide to lean into a slight hardship, not because you have to, but because you're training. You're building the inner fortitude that turns future failures from existential threats into manageable challenges. You're proving to yourself, in a small way, that you're tougher than your comfort zone believes. That inner strength leads to a different way of seeing things. It changes your whole relationship with time. The 11th idea is Memento Mori. Remember, you must die. It sounds stark, maybe dark, but for the Stoics it wasn't morbid. It was a clarifying lens. Life being finite makes every experience precious, even failure. Thinking about the end isn't about fear. It's about focus. It strips away what's trivial. It asks a question. Your time is limited. How will you use it? Marcus Aurelius came back to this. He wrote in his journal, "You could leave life right now. Let that decide what you do, what you say and think." He didn't mean a frantic life. He meant an intentional one. Don't wait. If you have something true and good to say it now. If you have an amends to make it now. If you have work that fits your purpose, begin it now. The chance of an ending gives the present its weight. This applies directly to failure. When you have a setback, it's easy to get stuck in shame or regret. You replay it, you berate yourself, you can waste weeks, months held captive by one event. Memento Mori cuts through that. It asks from your final moments, looking back on your whole life, how much importance will you give this one setback? Would you wish you'd spent 6 months in shame over a missed promotion? Or would you wish you'd forgiven yourself, learned the lesson, and moved on? Try a thought experiment. Take a current failure, something weighing on you. Imagine yourself at the end of a long life, resting peacefully, reviewing your journey. From that distant, compassionate point, look back at this moment. What do you see? You probably see a person trying, stumbling and getting back up. You see the courage in the attempt more clearly than the stumble itself. You see how that event, painful as it was, became a pivot. It led to growth or a new direction. From the deathbed, the failure isn't a stain, it's a chapter. A necessary one. That shift can drain the drama from a present difficulty, the lasting pain. So bring it to a practical question. If you knew for certain you had only 1 year left to live, how would your view of this failure change? Would it still feel like a catastrophe? Or would it shrink to its proper size, a temporary event in a precious, limited span of time? Would you maybe see it as an invitation to courage you hadn't yet shown? The urgency of Memento Mori doesn't create panic. It creates priority. It tells you to stop wasting the gift of your present moments on prolonged regret. To extract the lesson, to offer yourself the forgiveness you would at life's end, and to turn your finite attention toward what truly matters, your next act of integrity. Your next moment of connection, your next step forward. Your failure is just one thread in a much larger web. That's the Stoic idea of Sympatheia. Everything's connected by a kind of shared reason, cause and effect. So your setback isn't isolated. It sends ripples through that web, touching things you might never see. That brings a certain humility. It loosens the ego's hold on your own story of success or failure. You start to see yourself less as the sole author of an epic, and more as someone contributing to a much larger narrative. Marcus Aurelius kept coming back to this. He reminded himself, what doesn't help the hive doesn't help the bee. He saw himself as part of a greater whole, the human community and the natural world, and his duty was to work for its benefit. So your personal disappointment might serve a purpose in that hive you can't yet see. It might create an opening for someone else. It might prevent a bigger misstep. It might just be the necessary friction that polishes a future strength, not just in you, but in your wider circle. Think about a team brainstorming a solution. One person argues hard for an idea that gets rejected. They feel that sting, their contribution dismissed, but later, while talking about why that idea wouldn't work, someone else has a flash of insight. That flawed idea had one kernel, one assumption that pointed straight to the solution the team eventually adopts. The failed idea was the essential catalyst. It was the thread that, when pulled, revealed the pattern. The growth was collective, the success belonged to the hive, and every thread, even the one that seemed to break, was part of the strength. So here's a quiet question. Look at a recent setback of your own, a plan that didn't work, an effort that went unrecognized. Now widen the lens. Can you see how this event, in any small way, might have created space or provided a lesson, or offered data that helped someone else in your community, your family, your workplace? Maybe your honest admission of a mistake made it safer for a colleague to admit theirs, and that strengthened the team's trust. Maybe a project you stepped away from gave another person the chance to lead and flourish. This isn't about diminishing your experience, it's about seeing it within a larger tapestry. When you do that, the personal weight of the failure lightens. You're playing a part in a story much bigger than your own, and sometimes the most valuable part you can play is to be the thread that redirects the weave for everyone. Strategic growth often starts with realizing you don't need as much as you think. That chase for more, it can become a trap. More resources, more recognition, more security. We link our success to getting those things, and when we don't get them, it feels like a complete loss. So the 13th reflection is about contentment with less. It's simplifying what you want, reducing how attached you are to some lavish outcome. This isn't about giving up ambition, it's about making your ambition resilient. If your happiness isn't chained to a particular trophy, you become adaptable. A setback doesn't devastate you because your stability wasn't built on that prize. It was built on your own capacity to act well with less. Seneca wrote about this tranquility. He said true happiness is enjoying the present without anxious dependence on the future. To be content with what we have, he said, the rich person is the one who wants nothing. And that wanting nothing isn't about having nothing. It's about the freedom that comes when your peace isn't held hostage by your possessions or your position. Epictetus put it more directly. Wealth, he said, consists not in having great possessions but in having few wants. Happiness begins where desire ends. When you stop needing a specific outcome to feel whole, you become very difficult to knock over. There's a story about a tech startup. Their whole plan was built on securing a large round of venture capital. They made elaborate projections, hired a team based on that expected funding, pitched their vision, and they were rejected. Every single investor said no. The classic story would call that a catastrophic failure. But the founders, practicing a form of this Stoic art, made a radical pivot. They didn't just pivot to a new idea. They pivoted down. They looked at their core product and asked, what is the absolute simplest, most essential version of this that we can build with what we already have? They let go of the lavish office, the large team, the expensive marketing campaign. They stripped everything back to the problem they were solving and their own ability to code. That lean, focused model forced incredible clarity. They built a minimal version, released it to a small community, and listened intently. That initial failure became a gift. It forced them to find a path to success that required far less than they thought. And that path, built on necessity and focus, proved more sustainable. Ultimately more successful than their original, resource-heavy plan ever could have been. The failure of getting more became the catalyst for needing less. And in needing less, they found a stronger form of success. So here's a prompt. Take a moment and list 3 things you believe you absolutely need for your next goal. Maybe it's a certain amount of money, a specific title, a piece of equipment, or the approval of a particular person. Write them down. Now look at that list and challenge the absolute necessity of just one of those items. Ask yourself, if I never acquired this one thing, What is the most creative, resilient, or alternative path I could still take toward my core intention? This question doesn't discard your goals, it fortifies them. It builds a plan that can survive a no because it was never entirely dependent on a yes. Courage is what you do when you can't see the path. This is the 14th reflection, acting with courage. In Stoicism, courage isn't about not feeling fear. It's not fearlessness, it's the commitment to move forward with virtue anyway, to do what's right and wise and just, even when you're afraid, especially when you're afraid of failing again. After a setback, courage is what gets you off the floor. It's the courage to look honestly at what happened, to learn from it, and then the courage to try a different way, now that you have that hard-won wisdom. This is crucial. Stoic courage is never reckless. It isn't blind bravery. It's action tempered by the other virtues. It's aligned with wisdom, so you're not just charging ahead foolishly. It's aligned with justice, so your actions consider others. And it's aligned with temperance, so you act with discipline, not raw impulse. It's the application of all your virtues when things are difficult. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this. He wrote that the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way, and that requires courage to see and to act on. He also reminded himself not to think that what's hard for you is impossible for everyone. If it's humanly possible, consider it to be within your reach. That's a statement of courageous potential. There's the historical figure of Cato the Younger. In the final years of the Roman Republic, he was a senator known for his uncompromising virtue, his opposition to Julius Caesar. From a political standpoint, his efforts were a series of failures. He lost key debates, his warnings went unheeded. The republic he fought to preserve ultimately fell. But through the Stoic lens, his life wasn't judged by those outcomes. Those were external, not within his control. He was judged by the unwavering courage of his stance. He acted with integrity according to his principles, even when it was unpopular, even when it seemed futile, even when it led to his own difficult end. His contemporaries and later Stoics saw not a failed politician, but a man who demonstrated what it meant to live with courage and conviction. His legacy became one of moral fortitude, not political victory. His failures became a lesson in the courage to stand for something, regardless of the immediate consequence. So think of your own life, one past mistake, one recent failure that still carries a sting. The courageous next step isn't to pretend it didn't happen, or to immediately leap into some huge, risky new venture to overcompensate. The courageous step is often small and quiet and deeply wise. It's the action aligned with learning. This week, identify one small, courageous action you can take that flows directly from a lesson you learned. Maybe it's the courage to have a clarifying conversation you've been avoiding. Maybe it's the courage to start a project again, but with a revised, simpler approach based on what didn't work last time. Maybe it's simply the courage to write down the lesson and declare that chapter closed, so you can move forward unburdened. That's Stoic courage in practice. Moving forward not without fear but with virtue as your guide. Courage to act is one thing, but wisdom to wait is something else. An oak tree doesn't grow in a day. Strategic wisdom from failure doesn't either. This is the 15th reflection, cultivating patience, accepting the unfolding. It's the Stoic recognition. Some insights, some strengths, they can only be forged in the slow fire of time. We live with instant feedback. We expect quick fixes, rapid turnarounds. Immediate lessons. When we fail, we want an instant moral. We want the growth right now, but the deepest understanding, the kind that reshapes character, that often comes quietly. On its own schedule, it requires a patience that trusts the process, even when you can't see the progress. Marcus Aurelius reflected on this natural pace. He wrote about observing the movements of the stars, as if you were running their courses with them, and constantly considering the changes of the elements into one another. Thoughts like that, he said, they wash away the filth of life on the ground. He was reminding himself to align with the patient, cyclical rhythm of nature itself. A river carves a canyon not through a single flood, but through millennia of persistent flow. Your character is carved in a similar way. Each setback is like one season of erosion. One period of flow, the shape it leaves only becomes clear over many seasons. Take the long arc of scientific discovery. A researcher designs an experiment. It fails, the data doesn't support the idea. In a culture of instant results, that's a dead end. But in science, that failed experiment is a vital data point. It eliminates one possibility. It redirects inquiry. The real breakthrough might come years later, when another scientist reviews that old, failed data and sees a pattern no one else could see at the time. Penicillin, the structure of benzene, cosmic microwave background radiation. So many pillars of understanding were built on the slow accumulation of what first looked like mistakes. The failure wasn't the end of the story. It was a sentence in a much longer paragraph, one that required patience to read to its conclusion. So bring this to your own experience. Look back at a failure from a year ago or 5. What do you see now that you couldn't see then? Maybe a relationship that ended painfully. It taught you over slow months the true meaning of your own boundaries. A career detour that felt like a demotion. It forced you to develop a skill that later became your greatest asset. The lesson wasn't in the immediate shock of the event. It was in the quiet unfolding that followed. Your task is to grant yourself that same patience with your current struggles. You may not have the full picture yet. The meaning is still developing. Can you identify one recent setback where the clearest lesson still feels just out of reach? Instead of forcing an answer, practice a patient curiosity. Note the event and then set it down. Trust that with time, with more living, the pattern will emerge. The oak of your wisdom is growing, even on the days you cannot measure its height. Before a failure can hurt you, it has to get past your judgment. That's the 16th reflection, the discipline of assent. It's a cognitive defense. The Stoics thought suffering doesn't begin with the event. It begins when you give your automatic agreement to that first impression. That initial flash that says this is terrible or I'm a failure. The practice is to guard that gate. To pause, to choose your interpretation with intention. Epictetus taught this as the core of mental freedom. He said, "Don't let the force of an impression when it first hits knock you off your feet. Just tell it, hold on, let me see who you are, let me see what you represent, let me put you to the test." That moment of pause is your power. It's the space between the stimulus and your response. And in that space is your freedom to choose. Think about when you get harsh criticism, an email from a client tearing apart your work, or a blunt comment from a colleague in a meeting. The first impression floods in. It feels like a personal attack. It feels like a verdict on your worth. Your heart pounds, your face flushes. The discipline of assent asks you to catch that impression at the gate. Before you let it in to wreak havoc, you take one conscious breath, and in that breath you examine the impression. You ask, is this an accurate representation of reality, or is it my judgment added to the facts? The email contains words, those are facts. The judgment that those words define you is the impression you're about to assent to. The practice is to withhold that automatic assent. To say, this is feedback, it's information about the work presented in a harsh tone. The tone is about the sender's state. The information about the work is data I can assess. By separating the raw data from the charged interpretation, you transform the experience. It moves from a personal crisis to a professional problem-solving session. The emotion drains away, replaced by clarity. So here's a practical prompt. The next time you have a strong negative reaction to a setback, a rejection, a sharp word, practice the one-breath pause. In that breath, don't engage with the content of the thought. Just notice it arriving and label it. Say to yourself, that's an impression. then ask, what are the plain facts here separate from my story? This tiny act of vigilance trains your mind to be the guardian of its own peace. It turns every external event into raw material that you, and only you, get to interpret. And that's where true resilience is built. Every setback has a lesson inside. That's the 17th reflection. To unwrap it with intention, a Stoic faces failure with one main question. What is this here to teach me? It's an active stance, inquisitive. It turns a painful, passive experience into an active learning session. The lesson is always there. But you have to search for it deliberately. You look for it like a detective looks for clues, not to assign blame, to understand the mechanism. Seneca captured this. Fire is the test of gold, he wrote. Adversity is the test of strong men. He wasn't saying suffering is good by itself. He was saying it reveals the quality of what's already there. The difficulty shows you your own capacities, your limits, the true nature of the situation. That revelation is the lesson. Without the test, you might never know your own strength or your own need for a new strategy. Think of a gardener planting a new tree. A storm comes and knocks it over. The passive response is frustration. The tree is ruined. The active stance asks different questions. Was the soil too shallow? Was the stake not strong enough? Was this species not suited for this spot's exposure to the wind? The fallen tree isn't just a loss, it's a data point. It teaches the gardener about the conditions of their own garden. The next planting will be informed. More resilient, the failure becomes the foundation. So how do you do this deliberately? After any project that didn't go as planned, conduct a structured debrief. But make it lesson-focused. Set aside 10 minutes. Ask only 3 questions. 1. What did I intend to happen? State the original goal simply. 2. What actually happened? Stick to the observable facts without drama. And 3. Based on the gap between 1 and 2, what is the one most important lesson for next time? The power is in forcing it down to one sentence. That distillation forces clarity. It moves you from a cloud of regret to a single, pointed insight you can carry forward. After a failed product launch, the lesson might be, we need to test our messaging with real customers before a full campaign. After a strained conversation, it might be, I need to listen more before offering solutions. The lesson is your strategic takeaway, the value you extract. So here's a reflective prompt. Think of your most significant recent failure, the one that maybe still bothers you. Now challenge yourself to state the single most important lesson from it in one clear sentence. Not a story, not an excuse, not a judgment, just the lesson. Say it out loud or write it down. That sentence is the gold refined by the fire, the strategic growth waiting to be claimed. And once you have it, the failure's work is done. You've converted it into fuel. The lesson you take from a failure is a kind of self-mastery. To deny the impulse to sink into self-pity or rage, that's a strategic win. A quiet triumph, that's the 18th reflection, applying the Stoic virtue of moderation to your inner life. It's about managing those appetites for drama, for blame, for the story where you're the victim. Temperance isn't feeling nothing, it's choosing a measured response over a destructive one. It's the difference between a storm and a steady rain. Both are water. But one clears the air, the other floods. Seneca spoke to this. He wrote that the greatest wealth is a poverty of desires, and he applied that to emotions. He said we have to give up many things we're addicted to, things we consider good. Otherwise, courage vanishes. Courage is the contempt of hardship and pain. And temperance is what lets courage stand firm. It tames the wild horses of our reactions so wisdom can hold the reins. Take a significant financial loss. The first reaction comes from an appetite for immediate relief. You feel the sting, the anxiety, the shame. To escape it, you might indulge in reckless spending. Something luxurious, trying to buy back control or worth. It's a temporary anesthetic, but it deepens the problem. it adds a second layer of difficulty on top of the first. The temperate response is different. It acknowledges the pain, the worry, but it consciously denies the impulse to act from panic. It chooses a disciplined pause. Then a clear-eyed review of the budget, a thoughtful adjustment of plans, maybe a period of simpler living, not as punishment, but as a strategic recalibration. This response isn't flat, it's intelligent. It manages the appetite for quick comfort for the sake of longer-term stability. The failure remains, but it isn't compounded by a loss of self-command. So here's a point of awareness. Next time something goes wrong, pay attention to that first, indulgent craving. It might be the desire to complain extensively, to cast yourself as the wronged hero. It might be the urge to blame a colleague or a circumstance, to absolve yourself. It might be the pull to just numb out, to avoid the subject altogether. Temperance asks you to see that craving, and in that seeing, to gently deny it its usual feast. What's one indulgent reaction you can consciously deny yourself next time? Choose one. Maybe it's withholding that lengthy complaint session. Maybe it's pausing before assigning blame. For that moment, you practice temperance. You choose the clarity of a quiet mind over the noise of a fed appetite. And in that choice, you reclaim the ground where a real solution can grow. Your story is part of a larger one. There's this 19th reflection. It asks you to see your failures not as private wounds, but as data in your duty to contribute. That's the Cosmopolitan View. Seeing yourself as a citizen of the world, your setbacks become learning opportunities, not just for your own growth, but for how you can better fulfill your role. In the human community, it adds a layer of meaning, a layer of responsibility that goes beyond personal ego. It asks, how does this experience prepare me to be of greater use? Marcus Aurelius returned to this in his private writings. He reminded himself, my city and country, as Antoninus, is Rome. As a human being, it is the world. And then he gave himself this instruction: whatever is beneficial to the hive is beneficial to the bee. Your purpose from this view is to do your job as a human being and a citizen, to act for the common benefit. When you frame your struggles through that lens, their nature changes. A failure isn't just a blow to your pride. It's a signal. It's showing you where your current approach isn't aligning with the needs of the hive. It's feedback from the world, asking you to adjust your contribution. Consider a dedicated teacher. They spend hours crafting what they believe is the perfect lesson plan. It's clever, it's structured, it covers the material. But when they deliver it, the classroom is a sea of confused faces. The lesson fails. The students don't grasp the concept. The immediate, personal reaction could be deflation. I'm a bad teacher, this is embarrassing, but the Cosmopolitan View shifts the focus. The failure isn't about the teacher's worth, it's vital data about the student's needs. It reveals a gap between the instruction and their understanding. The teacher, committed to their role of educating, uses that data. They go back, they talk with the students. They discover that a foundational idea was missing. They adapt their approach. They find a new analogy, a different example. The next lesson succeeds. That initial failure directly improved their service. It made them a more effective citizen of their classroom community. Their personal setback became a public good. So here is a reflective prompt. Think of one specific personal failure, something that felt like a purely private disappointment. Now, widen the circle of concern. Ask yourself, how could overcoming this or learning from this make me more capable of helping others? If this setback taught you patience, how does that newfound patience make you a better partner? A better parent or colleague? If it taught you to communicate more clearly, how does that clarity allow you to contribute more effectively to your team's goals? Your growth isn't just for you, it's an upgrade to your capacity for service, and that turns every stumble into a step toward a more meaningful contribution. That duty to serve can feel heavy. especially when you're already carrying a setback. There's a pressure to explain yourself, to fix things, to show everyone you're back on track right away. But sometimes the most strategic response isn't immediate action. It's silence, it's reflection. This is the 20th reflection, the power of silence and withdrawal. It's a tactical retreat, not a surrender. You step back from the noise to hear your own wisdom. The modern world equates speed with competence. We're expected to react, to post, to explain, to pivot instantly. This constant reactivity can trap you. You end up addressing the symptom, the public perception, instead of the root cause. Stoicism offers a counterintuitive discipline. It values the strategic pause, the intentional withdrawal from the chatter, outside and inside, to regain composure, to regain clarity. Seneca wrote about this inward retreat. He said we must give our minds a holiday, let them expand in the open air, but then he clarified, the mind must be recalled sometimes into its own company. The key is to have retreats prepared for yourself, not a country house, but a retreat inside your own soul. There you can be most at ease. That's the ultimate fortress. When failure strikes, the instinct is to look outward, for solutions, for validation, for distraction. Seneca suggests the opposite. Look inward first. Withdraw into that prepared inner space. Sit with the facts of the event, away from the opinions of others, away from the frantic voice of your own panic. In that quiet, you can separate what happened from the story you're telling about it. A practical application is the strategic pause. After a major professional setback, a rejected proposal, a lost client, a public mistake, institute a personal rule. Commit to 24 hours of deliberate non-action. You do not send the defensive email. You do not make the frantic phone call to justify yourself. You do not post about it. You simply let it be for one full day. This pause serves two purposes. First, it allows the emotional wave to recede. The initial shock, anger, embarrassment has a half-life. Given space, it diminishes. What remains after 24 hours is often a clearer, calmer understanding of the actual problem. Second, it creates a vacuum. Your own reasoning can fill the space instead of being crowded out by reactive advice or your own impulsive thoughts. In that quiet, better solutions have room to emerge. Think of a leader who gets devastating quarterly results. The board is anxious. The team is looking for direction. The immediate pressure is to announce a dramatic restructuring, to make a bold, visible move to show control. But a leader practicing this would call for that strategic pause. They would withdraw not from responsibility, but from reactivity. They would spend that time in sober reflection, analyzing the data without the heat of the moment, consulting a trusted few for perspective, not for quick answers. The action they take after that pause is far more likely to be measured, sustainable, effective. It comes from composed strategy, not panicked survival. So look back at a recent failure or sharp criticism. Can you identify a moment where you reacted immediately? A defensive email, a frustrated comment, a rushed decision. Now imagine if you had imposed a 24-hour period of silence and reflection before that reaction. How might your response have been different? More graceful, more strategic, or simply unnecessary? That imagined difference highlights the power of the pause. It's in the quiet after the storm that you can best chart your new course. Silence lets you hear other voices, not the noise, the guidance from people who were here before. You're not the first to fail. You have mentors in the Stoics. They faced worse. Their lives aren't just ideas, they're application under extreme pressure. Studying their biographies is the 21st reflection. It normalizes struggle, shows the principles in action, not theory, a living model for when your own resources feel thin. Consider their circumstances. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, exiled by the Emperor Claudius to Corsica, stripped of his status, his influence, his comfortable life, he spent 8 years there. That's a profound public failure, a crushing personal setback. his response wasn't to wither. He turned that exile into one of his most productive periods. He wrote consolations to his mother, profound letters on philosophy, laid the groundwork for his later works. He applied his own teaching. He wrote that a gem can't be polished without friction. A man can't be perfected without trials. His exile was the friction that polished his wisdom, or Epictetus, born into slavery, his body legally owned by another. He endured a physical disability. Tradition says from a brutal injury during his enslavement. He later gained his freedom and founded his own school. Teaching a philosophy of inner freedom, his entire life was a testament to the core Stoic truth that our power lies not in our circumstances, but in our judgments of them. His teachings came from lived hardship. He said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." His life was that embodiment. Then Marcus Aurelius, the emperor. He didn't face poverty or slavery, but a burden of a different scale. He spent nearly his entire reign on the distant frontiers, leading grueling military campaigns against invading tribes. He faced constant political intrigue, the plague that ravaged his cities, the immense weight of ruling a vast domain, all while grappling with his own mortality. The imperfections of those around him. His private journal, Meditations, was written in tents by campfire light. It's the sound of a man applying Stoic principles to stay sane and just in chaos. He wrote to himself that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you find strength. He was reminding himself in real time. These lives show you something. The philosophy wasn't an abstract hobby for them. It was a survival manual, a performance-enhancing system for the soul under siege. When you read about Seneca writing in exile, or Epictetus teaching after slavery, or Marcus ruling through war and plague, your own setbacks are reframed. They're not unique catastrophes, they're part of the human condition, and these figures show the condition can be met with grace, with purpose, with profound productivity. So here's a prompt. This week, choose one Stoic, Seneca, Marcus, Epictetus, or another like Musonius Rufus. Spend 20 minutes reading about one specific challenging episode from their life. Not their entire biography, just one difficult chapter: Seneca's exile, Marcus's years on the German frontier, Epictetus's early life. As you read, ask one question. How can I see the principles we've discussed? Amor Fati, the view from above, the discipline of assent being applied in their choices and their words. You're not looking for perfection, you're looking for the attempt. The human being reaching for their philosophy as a tool. That connection across centuries turns history into a mentorship. And your struggle becomes a dialogue with some of the most resilient minds who ever lived. That mentorship across centuries points to a single standard. For a Stoic, the only real failure is failing to live with virtue and reason. Everything else is just an event. This is the ultimate reframe. It redefines success itself as living in accordance with nature. The Stoic founder Zeno defined the goal of life that way, to live in agreement with nature. His successor Cleans echoed it, and this doesn't mean retreating to the woods. It means living in harmony with your own rational nature and the rational order of the universe. It means using your reason to act with wisdom, courage, justice, moderation. And the liberating part is this goal is entirely within your control. You can choose virtue in any circumstance. External outcomes, wealth, reputation, status, even health, they're preferred or dispreferred, but they are not the measure. They're materials to be used well or poorly. This makes society's definitions of winning and losing secondary. They become data points, not verdicts. Your success is an internal state, a way of being, not a trophy. It's something no one can give you and no one can take away. It's the one thing you always have the power to achieve, even in what the world calls a catastrophic loss. Consider two people. The first achieves great wealth and acclaim through cunning and deception. They cut corners, undermine colleagues, win a prestigious award. By external metrics, a roaring success, but internally they're in conflict with nature. They've acted against reason and justice. They may feel anxiety, guilt, a hollow emptiness. Their life, from the Stoic view, is a failure of the highest order. They've lost their own integrity, which is the only possession that truly matters. Now the second person, they run a small, honest business. They treat employees with fairness, provide real value, operate with transparency. A larger competitor uses predatory tactics, and the small business fails. The owner loses their investment. By external metrics, a clear failure, but internally they acted with virtue throughout. They lived in agreement with their rational, social nature. They can close the doors with their integrity intact. Their conscience is clear. From the Stoic perspective, this person succeeded at the only game that counts. They won their own soul. The external loss is a hardship, a difficult event, but it does not define them. It cannot touch their core achievement. This distinction is the ultimate liberation from the fear of failure. When your self-worth is decoupled from an outcome you can't fully control, you become unshakable. You can engage fully, strive boldly, and if the world says no, you haven't lost anything essential. You've practiced virtue, you've lived in accordance with nature, and that is the success you were aiming for all along. So a quiet question, looking back over your life, not at awards or milestones, but at the moments of choice. When have you felt most successful by this Stoic definition? A time you acted with courage or justice or great patience, regardless of how things turned out. Maybe it was a difficult truth you told when a lie was easier, a kindness you offered when you were tired and received nothing in return, a project you poured your heart into that never saw the light of day but taught you discipline. In that moment, you were living in agreement with your nature. You were succeeding at being human, and that kind of success is a foundation nothing can ever break. Gratitude for a setback, that's the 23rd reflection, the practice of gratitude for the test itself. It goes past just accepting what happened. It goes past learning something from it. You get to a place of real appreciation. A Stoic learns to feel thankful for the failure, because that failure is the training ground. It's where you build character. That's the final step in reframing it all. You start with resistance, then you move to acceptance. Then you see the obstacle as the path forward. And then, finally, you thank it for being there. This gratitude isn't passive, it's not resignation, it's an active recognition. You're thankful for the raw material it gave you. The exact material you needed to build a stronger version of yourself. Marcus Aurelius had a model for this. He wrote in his journal, "When you get up in the morning, think about the privilege. To be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." Then he added the crucial part, the people you'll meet today, they'll be difficult, meddlesome, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, surly. They are that way because they can't tell good from evil, but you have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and you recognize the wrongdoer has a nature related to yours, not the same blood but the same mind, a share of the divine. Then he concludes that thought, none of them can hurt you, no one can implicate you in ugliness, you can't feel angry at one of your own kind or hate him. We were born to work together, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of upper and lower teeth. To work against each other is unnatural, and to be angry, to turn your back, those are forms of opposition. The key is his framing. He sees difficult people not as curses, but as necessary parts of his training. They give him the chance to practice patience, to practice justice, to practice understanding. He's grateful for the test they represent, because without the test, the virtue is just an idea, an untrained idea. Think of an athlete at their peak. They enter a major tournament as the favorite, a string of victories behind them. Then in an early round, they lose. A stunning, decisive loss. The immediate pain is sharp. The public disappointment is real. The easy path is to see it as a pure setback, a stain on the record. But the athlete who practices this Stoic gratitude sees deeper. They watch the replay not with shame, with a curious, thankful eye. They're grateful the loss happened now. At this tournament, and not in the finals, they're grateful it exposed a critical weakness in their footwork or a predictable pattern in their strategy. Something they'd been blind to during all the wins. That loss becomes a gift of brutal, honest feedback. It gives them a blueprint, a perfectly targeted blueprint for their next phase of training. Now they can improve with a precision that comfort and continued wins would never have allowed. Their gratitude for the test fuels the comeback. A more focused comeback, a more resilient one. The failure wasn't the end of the story. It was the plot twist, the twist that made the eventual triumph meaningful. This is the highest level, turning failure into strategic growth. It's seeing the event not as a theft, but as a donation. The world donated a difficulty to you. And you are saying thank you for the raw material. Now, how will you build with it? Here's a simple prompt to close. Think of one recent difficult experience. A professional rejection, a personal misunderstanding, a goal you missed. Set aside the story of why it was hard and ask one single question. For what one thing about this experience can I be genuinely grateful? It might be small. It might be that it showed you who your real supporters are. It might be that it taught you the importance of a detail you'd overlooked. It might simply be that it gave you a chance to practice a patience you didn't know you had. Write that one thing down or state it clearly in your mind. That act of naming the gratitude completes a circuit. It transforms the energy of the event from something that drained you into something that now fuels you. The failure is over. Your power is here in this moment, deciding what to do next. This is about letting go of the past. The Stoics, they saw the present as the only place where your will actually works. The past is fixed. It's a set of facts. You can't control it. To dwell there, replaying the mistake, nursing the regret, that's a choice. And that choice spends your agency, your current precious agency, on something you can't change. It's like trying to steer a car by staring at the road behind you. You'll miss the turn ahead. You might crash again. Epictetus had an instruction for this. He said, don't demand that things happen as you wish. Wish that they happen as they do happen. Then you'll go on well. More directly, he taught to be concerned not with what has happened, but with what is happening now. Your present task, your present duty, that's the only thing asking for your attention. The past is a memory. The future is an expectation. But right now, in this breath, you can act. Consider a financial analyst. They make a significant error in a report. It leads to a poor investment decision for a client. The mistake is discovered. That past event is done. The numbers were wrong. The client is upset. The immediate reaction is that internal storm. I should have double-checked. How could I be so careless? My reputation is ruined. That mental loop is exhausting, and it's entirely focused on the column of things not up to you, the action that's already complete. The Stoic approach is a pivot. You acknowledge the error fully. You take responsibility, but then you anchor in the present conditions. The present condition is a client who's lost trust. The present condition is a report that needs correction. The present condition is your own ability to think clearly. Your task now isn't to relive the error. Your task is to craft the most honest, thorough, helpful response possible. You schedule the difficult meeting. You prepare the corrected analysis. You outline a plan to prevent it in the future. You focus every ounce of energy on the next right action, the action you can take today. That doesn't erase the mistake, but it transforms your relationship to it. The mistake becomes a fixed point in the past you learned from, not a ghost haunting your present. So here's a practical question. What's one concrete action you can take right now? One step forward from a past setback, not a grand plan for total redemption. One small, tangible, forward-moving step. It could be sending a single email to reopen a conversation you thought was closed. It could be spending 30 minutes today learning a skill that your last failure revealed you lacked. It could be writing down the lesson from that event on a note card and placing it on your desk. A reminder to focus on today's work. That single action taken in the present is a declaration. It tells the past its lesson has been received and that your energy now belongs to building what comes next. The present moment is your workshop, and you're the only one who can step inside and begin. Turning failure into growth, it's not something you do once. It's a daily practice, a kind of craft. This is the 25th reflection, the last one, and it's about that loop. We've gone through 24 ways to see a setback differently. But understanding it isn't the change is in the repetition. Stoicism is a lifelong practice. You apply these principles. Every failure, every irritation, every doubt is another repetition. Like going to the gym for your character, it's not about reaching a place where you never feel the sting. It's about building the reflex to respond with virtue when you do feel it. Epictetus said it plainly, don't explain your philosophy, embody it, that's the core. Philosophy is a way of life, not theories. It's a craft you hone. Through consistent, patient effort, you wouldn't lift a heavy weight once and be strong forever. You wouldn't play a complex piece once and master the instrument. The strength comes from showing up again and again, especially on the days you don't feel like it, especially after a performance that felt like a failure. Think of a musician in their daily practice. They're working on a difficult passage. Their fingers fumble. They hit a wrong note. The sound is discordant. An amateur might slam the piano lid. They see the wrong note as a catastrophe, a sign they aren't good enough, but the craftsman hears it differently. That wrong note is not a verdict, it's feedback, precise information. It tells them exactly where their technique needs work, where the muscle memory isn't secure yet. They don't despair, they slow down, they isolate the measure, they play it again and again. They're grateful for the mistake because it showed them the path for today's work. Tomorrow's practice is informed by today's stumbles. This is the continuous loop. Your life is that practice room. Every social friction, every missed deadline, every shortcoming is that wrong note. It's not the end of the song, it's the signal telling you where your inner craft needs focus. The goal isn't a flawless performance, it's the integrity of the daily practice itself. So here's a final invitation. Look back over these reflections, from the dichotomy of control to Amor, Fati, from the view from above to the discipline of assent. Choose just one that resonates with a current challenge, or one that feels most difficult for you. For the next 7 days, make that your conscious practice. Your theme: if you choose the dichotomy of control, your daily task is to sort events, your column and the world's column, whenever you feel stress. If you choose Amor, Fati, your task is to find one small thing each day to embrace. Especially if you wish it were different, this isn't about perfection, it's about direction. 1 week of focused, gentle repetition to turn the idea from a concept in your mind into a slight groove in your character. That's how the craft is built, 1 day, 1 reflection, 1 conscious response at a time. The loop never really ends, and that's the point. The practice is the purpose. The growth is in the return. These 25 reflections aren't something to check off. They're more like a set of tools, different tools, but all for the same craft. The craft of taking your life, the raw material of it, and building resilience from that, building strategic insight. There are themes that run through all of them. Shifting from feeling like a victim to being a student, focusing only on what you can actually control, seeing challenges not as interruptions, they're the actual curriculum. And in every event, there's a lesson there, waiting to be found. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this. He said, our life is what our thoughts make it, or more directly, you have power over your mind. Not outside events, realize that, and you find strength. But that strength, it isn't some sudden superpower. It's quiet, It comes from the daily choice to judge things with intention. To see the obstacle not as a blockade, to see it as the path forward. So your journey with failure, it's never about the event itself. It's about the meaning you choose to build from it. So as we finish here, one final prompt. Look back over these reflections. Which one resonated the most? Was it Amor Fati, loving your fate, or the practical sorting of what's in your control and what isn't? Maybe the view from above that gave you a moment of peace. Choose that one, the one that felt like a key turning, and this week apply it deliberately. Pick one situation right now, a small friction, a lingering worry, a recent disappointment. Use that single reflection as your lens. See what changes when you look through it. We'd love to hear about it. If you feel moved to share, tell us in the comments which reflection you're taking with you, or a lesson failure has taught you. That's how you build a community, not of perfect lives, but of shared growth. Remember, strategic growth isn't a distant destination. It's a lens, a way of seeing. And that lens is always available right here in the next choice you make.